So, love is a physical thing. What a title. What does it even mean, right? I mean, I've got an idea. So I decided to ask my good friend Jason Posnick. He was unhelpful. So, of course, I decided to ask the sexy new artificial intelligence in town, ChatGPT, right? Here's what I got, I quote, "Love is a physical thing" is a phrase that could have multiple interpretations depending on the context in which it is used. In general, it can mean that the speaker believes that love is not just an emotion or feeling, but also has a physical component, such as the release of certain hormones in the body. It could also mean that the speaker believes that physical touch and affection are important components of a loving relationship. Another interpretation of the phrase, "love is a physical thing," could be that the speaker believes that love can manifest in physical ways, such as through actions or gestures, rather than just being a feeling or emotion. It could also mean that physical attraction plays an important role in falling in love. It could also mean that the speaker believes that the act of making love is an important aspect of a romantic relationship. It's worth noting that the phrase is quite general, and the meaning could be different depending on the context and the person who is using it. Turns out even artificial intelligence knows that the answer is, like most things in love, it's complicated, right? Now, I don't have time this morning to unpack all of the different things that could be associated with this idea of love is a physical thing. But I do think our particular historical moment presents us with a few challenges when it comes to these issues. One is our current cultural context. I mean, for decades in America, there has been a push to make the physical less forbidden, to make sex less sacred than it was, say, for our grandparents or our parents. So as a result, now it is no longer a cultural taboo to have sex with someone you aren't married to, at least not like it once was. At the same time, we're in the midst of a sexual identity crisis, I think, in our culture. As Carl Trueman would retell our history, we have elevated feeling from something that we experience momentarily to something that tells me about who I am. And our culture is telling us with louder and louder voices that whatever you feel, that's who you are. Surely this creates questions for us then around this idea that love is a physical thing. At the same time, having the world of the internet within arm's reach 24 hours a day means that porn is now just the norm. I mean, if studies are to be believed, the majority of us in this room have viewed porn before, and surely a regular habit of watching other people have sex is going to influence the way someone engages with an exclusive sexual partner. At the same time, I think our churches are in a bit of a sexual crisis. For decades, we preached and taught that true love waits, raised generations of students to believe that the only thing you really need to know about sex is that you just don't do it till you're married. Of course, what does God think about me if I don't wait? And what am I supposed to think about sex if I do? And if God only cares about sex, then how about all those other physical, sexual acts? He must not really care about those, right? I think all of these factors combine into this cocktail of confusion for many of you. I mean, what in the world are you supposed to think about love and sex these days? Well, I don't have time this morning to unpack all of the ways that these issues have arisen or the ways in which they distort truth, but I would like to perhaps just shift the conversation a little bit. In fact, I'd like for us to see this idea that love is a physical thing through the lens of physical expressions of love. Specifically, I'd like for us to think about this idea, physical expressions of love, as a road or a path. Just imagine, if you would, a pathway, a road right here on the stage. It starts by entering into a secure, committed, exclusive relationship with someone. And then once you're there, in that committed relationship, we begin with delight. And that delight then leaves room for desire to grow. And that desire continues to grow and expand and leads to invitation. And then that invitation leads to fulfillment. I'm going to call this whole path, all of these stops along the way, physical expressions of love. And I think this will help us make more sense of the song. And so, let's jump into our text for today, Song of Songs, chapter 4, beginning in verse 1. Here, the lover expresses delight. Now, if delight doesn't sound like sex, that's because it isn't, right? No, maybe it's a little bit surprising for us that the lovers don't begin this section in an intimate embrace, but that's not how it starts. It just starts with wonder and awe. And maybe, as we read the first few lines of the man's words to his lover, it feels awkward. I mean, these words are not exactly romantic for our cultural context. Some of them could work, right? Some of them could be like awkward but endearing. Maybe a little like, Buddy the Elf asking Jovi out on a date, right? Saying how he feels warm around her, how his tongue swells up a little. Okay, weird, but it works because we're rooting for the guy. So this guy talks, your eyes are doves behind your veil. Okay. Your teeth, it's like lambs that washed. They're coming up the hill. The two of them together, they're like in a pair. Not one of them is left without the other. They're together. Okay. Not sexy, but okay. But frankly, I think other lines here, they fall more squarely in the creepy camp, right? Your hair is like a flock of jumping goats. Yikes. Your neck, it's like David's thick stone tower. Your breasts, and we're like, whoa. Oh, okay, bucko, this is getting uncomfortable. But I think if we see it like that, we'll never understand what this is supposed to do. These are not ancient Israelite pickup lines, okay? Instead, I think it helps to see this as a wasif. Wasif is an Arabic word for this type of song or poem that exists in other cultures around the world. And the basic idea is that the poet is praising his lover by describing the way that their body impacts them or makes them feel. You can't write a wasif about just anybody, right? This has to be about someone the poet is completely and totally captivated by, which I think works because that's the very first word in our passage. The first word in Hebrew is hine. It's a word that's often translated as behold or look, but a handful of times in the Old Testament, it means something more like the person is impacted by something that they're observing. They have a really strong emotional response to whatever it is that they're seeing. In fact, I think a good translation for it here would be, wow. It's about feeling. When the lover looks into the face of his beloved, he goes searching for anything else in life, other moments when he has beheld breathtaking beauty and walked away profoundly changed. So, her hair, it was like that one time he was standing and he just saw that whole flock of goats jumping down the mountain. There were hundreds of them, all jumping together, leaping together. It was this waving beauty. I mean, he'll never forget that moment. Her lips, that thin red line, her cheeks, her whole face, really. It reminds him of that time that he saw that pomegranate with that slit down the middle. It was so ripe and open, and he maybe smelled the fruit smell of the pomegranate. Maybe he imagined tasting those sweet little seeds inside of his own mouth. Her neck. Oh, he'll never forget the first time he came upon the Tower of David, standing there strong and proud and confident. I mean, it actually stirred something deep inside of him. And then her breasts. It was like that time he stumbled upon those two twin gazelle fawns grazing among the lotus flowers side by side. Do you see what he's doing? He's just working down her body and describing the ways that different elements of her body actually bring him delight. He is delighting in his lover. And then all of a sudden, we stop the wasif and we shift to another one of the senses, smell. And here, we also shift ever so slightly from delight to desire. Notice what he says. He notices that as he's working down her body, he gets to her breasts, and I think perhaps it's just too much for him to handle, too much for him to take in, and so he just expresses this desire to hang out there, I think, all day, maybe all night, between her breasts, in my opinion, going to what he calls Myrrh Mountain and Frankincense Peak. And then, verse 7, all of you is beautiful, my lover, and there is not a blemish in you. Now notice, I don't think what he's saying is that she's got no flaws whatsoever. She's been photoshopped, ready for all the social media. No, remember, this is love poetry. This is all about how he sees her, how she makes him feel, and in his eyes, she is absolutely beautiful. Do you see what the lover is doing here? He's praising his lover, talking about how he delights in her, how he desires her. And then, just like that, the song is over, and we move on. And maybe we're a little surprised. This is the song of songs, after all. I mean, we finish the song, and they're not even touching. It's actually pretty normal for the song. I mean, there are sexual overtones all throughout the whole book, but the actual act of sex is not front and center. In fact, in the Song of Songs, sex takes a backseat to desire. I wonder if we've lost sight of desire these days. We're pretty impatient. I mean, think about it. You don't really wait for much of anything, do you? My guess is the longest you have to wait during the week is when you stand in line for Tendy Tuesday, right? So we start a relationship, and we're so impatient, we just can't wait that we just skip to all the touching, all right away, as if we can't possibly think of any other way to express our feelings for this other person. And you know what? Physical touching feels pretty good. But that's not the way, it seems, that God has intended this to work. If we skip to that, we miss the role that delight is intended to play. And if we crowd out room for delight, then we're crowding out room for desire to continue to grow. So maybe it would be helpful for us to just pause and listen to the words of this man for his lover without it ever giving way to more than just delight and desire. Just because love is a physical thing doesn't mean that they have to have sex to have love. Delight and desire are physical expressions of love in their own right. But then, we start a new song. And this time, desire leads to invitation. He picks it up in verse 8. With me from Lebanon, bride. With me from Lebanon come. He's calling her down from the high mountains, from this inaccessible height where she's hanging out. He can't reach her up there, and he wants to get to her. So he's inviting her down. Notice, not commanding, not forcing, not coercing, but inviting her down. And why? Because he's a hot mess, frankly. Verse 9, you have wrecked me, my sister bride. Now, notice, this is when he says wrecked, it's the word in Hebrew that says something like, oh, you have hearted me. But it doesn't really mean that she just really likes him. The heart in Hebrew is this place where you think, the place where you make decisions and process information. And as he's observing his woman, as he's observing this girl, she's just taken control over this part of his heart. In fact, some translations say, you have captivated me. You captured my heart, or you drive me crazy. It's all good. And it just happened from one jewel from her necklace, one glance of her eyes. And he goes on and says, how beautiful is your lovemaking, my sister, bride. Now, I don't know what exactly he means by that word lovemaking. I'll be honest, I'm not sure what all it entails. But I'm pretty convinced that this is something you do with that special someone that you don't do with other people. And just so she should know, her skills are better than wine. Now, don't be thrown off by the phrase, my sister, here, right? She's not his actual sister. That'd be weird. Okay. No, instead, this is just an ancient Near Eastern way of talking about your lover. We see it in lots of ancient Near Eastern texts. I mean, I think other cultures probably think it's weird that we call our lovers baby. But so is love language, right? Next, he goes on to say, your love is better than wine, and the smell of your oils than all perfumes. Now, these could be oils that she puts on her body, but I'm pretty convinced that these are oils that actually come from her body. Verse 11, her mouth is a honeycomb, and inside he finds honey and milk. Do you guys remember that classic description of the promised land? A land flowing with milk and honey. Same words here. Yeah, this guy has discovered another promised land in her mouth. He goes on, your garments, they smell like Lebanon, that northern border of the promised land, glorious, beautiful Lebanon. Notice what we're doing here. He's just shifting from sense to sense, from sight, your looks wreck me, to taste, your lovemaking is better than wine, to smell, oh, the oils, back to taste, honey and milk, and then back to smell again, oh, Lebanon. He is delighting in his lover. He is delighting in this woman, and the delight gives way to desire, and as that desire continues to grow, he invites her again and again to come to him. And this is where things take a little more intimate turn. Maybe you thought we were there already. Oh boy. Verse 12. A secured garden is my sister, bride, a torrent secured, a spring sealed. Now I think it's possible that a garden or spring could refer to her love in general. I think it's even possible it could refer to her body in general. But based on the ancient Near Eastern imagery, I'm pretty convinced that he's actually talking about a very specific part of her body. It's not her attractive eyelashes, not her sexy toes, no. This is the very specific part of her body that he wants to enter when he makes love. Now, notice, this has been locked. It has been sealed, and it seems from the inside, which is a good thing. She has kept others out, but he knows if he is going to enjoy her garden, if he is going to enjoy the spring, she has to allow him in. She cannot be forced. What he wants, she has to give. And so he talks about what is behind those locked gates, what is behind that sealed spring. Verse 13, your shoots are a paradise of pomegranates with the choicest fruit, henna with spikenard and saffron, spice reed and cinnamon with all incense wood, myrrh and aloes with all the best perfumes. Landy says this is reminiscent of Noah's Ark. 2 by 2, the spices parade by and stand and call for his attention, for him to smell. And so he issues the call one more time, a spring of gardens, a well of living waters, and waters flowing from Lebanon. He's inviting his lover to come. He's inviting her to open to him. And then for the first time, at least in our poem, the woman speaks. Last week we talked about chapters 1 through 3. The woman talks a lot there. But in this text, the woman hasn't spoken up to this point. And now for the first time, she opens her mouth. And what does she say? Well, she issues a command to the winds, here referred to as the north and south. And this is what she says: arise, north, and enter, south. Waft through my garden. Make its perfumes flow. Let my beloved come to his garden, and let him eat its delectable fruits. Do you see what's happening here? She is now issuing an invitation to him to come and enjoy love. All of this is part of these physical expressions of love: delight and desire and invitation. Now, I said before that in the song, sex takes a backseat to desire. I think that's true. But virtually all commentators agree there's at least one point in the book where they do actually have sex. And it's here. Song of Songs, chapter 5, verse 1. The man talks again. I have come to my garden, my sister, bride. I have smelled my myrrh with my perfume. I have eaten my honeycomb with my honey. I have drunk my wine with my milk. The man is celebrating the delights of fulfillment. And then it seems like there's this chorus of the community that knows what's happening. And so they start to cheer them on. Eat, friends. Eat, lovers. Drink and be drunk with lovemaking. And maybe this feels really awkward for us, right? Knowing that they're having sex. Oh my. Knowing that they know they're having sex and then they're talking about it. But this doesn't seem strange or weird in the text. It just is. There is no guilt. There is no shame. Fox notes, the lovers show no embarrassment. They make no apology. They express no defiance. They do not relish sex as a forbidden fruit. Instead, it is just the end of this long, delightful process of physical expressions of love, experiencing the fulfillment together, I think, the way that God intended. Now, maybe we can be happy for them, genuinely. But for many in our culture, this is not their experience of love. And for many of us, this is not our experience of love. But I wonder if it's because we've misplaced the role that physical expressions of love are supposed to play in this whole process. And I wonder if just for a minute it would be helpful to set aside the song and instead just ask a basic fundamental question. What are physical expressions of love for in the first place? I mean, why does this whole path even exist? Now, I understand that part of the purpose of physical expressions of love is procreation. Okay, right. God said, be fruitful and multiply. I have figured that out. I've got 5 kids, right? I think I'm good. But what I'm asking is why this way, right? Surely if it was just about making babies, God could have come up with something else. Touching fingertips, interlocking hair, I don't know. It seems like we could have done something else. Why this way? As I've mulled this question over the past several months, I've come to this conclusion. Physical expressions of love intensify our attachment. Here's what I mean. Attachment is a bond, a really strong bond that we form with a few key individuals in life that ends up defining for us how we see ourselves, how we see ourselves in the world. We don't make this bond, this attachment bond with many people, but when we do form the bond, it is really, really, really strong. In fact, psychologist Gordon Neufeld says, attachment is the most powerful force in the universe. He argues that as children, we're supposed to attach to our parents, to those older and wiser and more loving than us, so that they can orient us to the rest of life, help us understand how we fit into this broader world of ours. But then, as we grow older, we are then supposed to attach to our spouses, form a lifelong bond of commitment to one another and a foundation for new life to emerge. So, to summarize, as babies, as children, we attach to our parents. As adults, we attach to our spouses. And those attachment bonds are really, really strong. Within the context of marriage, then, I think physical expressions of love are this place of unique, special vulnerability, unlike just about anything else. And something about those moments actually intensify our attachment to our partner. However, when used differently than intended, I think these physical expressions of love can actually wreak havoc on our relationships. Maybe an illustration would help. So I picked up woodworking a few years ago, and early on in the process, I discovered wood glue. Wood glue's amazing, right? I realized that when you put a lot of wood glue on a joint, man, that connection is really, really strong. And so when I first discovered it, I was like, wood glue here, and wood glue there, and wood glue everywhere, right? And then I also realized, oh man, wood glue is like permanent. Like once you put wood glue on a joint, it is not coming off. That connection is made forever. At the same time, that connection, if it's only made with wood glue, actually isn't that strong. I mean, because there's nothing else to support it, if that joint endures any amount of stress, it's going to give. Usually not right at the point where you put the wood glue, but somewhere else in a weaker point in the wood, and it will always take some of the other piece of wood with it. So I realized that if I want to make a strong and secure connection, I have to prepare the wood. I have to increase the points and the depths of connection using screws or dowels or some other joining method. And then, as a final step in the process, I use the wood glue in order to cement the bond. In other words, wood glue is fantastic at cementing a bond, but it can only reinforce what is already there. Now, I don't imagine that I need to spell this out too much for us. But I wonder if some of us have used sex and physical sexual acts a little bit like I used wood glue when I first discovered it. Apply liberally, hope for the best, right? But that rarely works out for us, right? It does form a really strong connection, but that connection, it won't hold up under any significant amount of stress. And as at the moment of use, at the moment it is used, it actually does create that bond. But that's not the way that we were intended to use it. Sex too early in a relationship often results in intense pain, even trauma. And other physical sexual acts that just toe the line of sex without actually crossing it, they're not much better either. Listen, I understand our longing for these things because I understand our longing for attachment. So many of us just want to connect to someone. So many of us are just longing for someone to look at us and love us, to tell us that we matter, to tell us that we're significant, to tell us that we're worthy of being loved, that we're delightful, that our voice is worth being heard. And so we find someone who makes us feel special. And when that person looks at me, man, I feel like they get me. I feel like they understand me. I feel like they see me. I feel like they love me. And so we fall for them and hard. And we go out on a few dates, and maybe we even get engaged, and then we start eyeing that wood glue. Maybe it's about time. And you know what? Wood glue works. But that's not the way that God intended for us to use it. Listen, God intended sex and physical sexual acts to be a part of this journey of physical expressions of love. And as hard as it is, we have to wait to use them. Even if we misuse them, they still do that intensifying attachment work. So we have to enter into this long process called love. We have to begin with delight and desire and invitation. And only once we've established all of that in the context of a secure, committed relationship can we enjoy the more intimate moments of love. Let's think about how this works then with the Song of Songs. The man and the woman enter into this committed relationship with one another. I mean, it's just him and her for life. This is ancient Israelite wisdom literature. They did not have any other box for what we read here other than that of a married man and woman together. And so in the context of a lifelong committed relationship, they experience delight and then desire and then invitation and then fulfillment. All of this part of what I think is God's intention. Physical expressions of love. Of course, the greatest attachment in life is not forged with another flawed human partner, but rather with God himself. Of all the metaphors that God could have used to describe his relationship with his people, he actually used that of a husband and a wife. most often, one of the most common metaphors in all of Scripture. And so, if the Song of Songs is intended to be this picture of perfect human love, of intimate relations between two individuals as God intended, perhaps we can hear the voice of God's longing for intimacy with us in the words of the man in Song of Songs, chapter 4. Physical intimacy is but a taste of the depth of intimacy that God longs for with us. Now, maybe that feels weird or strange, but here's the reality. God loves you. And love is a physical thing. Sure, we may not experience fulfillment on this side of eternity, but I do think some of these other expressions of love are ways that God reaches out to us to draw us closer in attachment to Him. Several months ago, I took a weekend solitude retreat. My expectations were modest: get some time away, pray, spend some time in nature. So to facilitate this, I ended up booking a room at a monastery. Spent the weekend praying the psalm with 60-some monks. When I first showed up and started into their prayer times, it felt a little strange and foreign, the music echoing off the walls. But the longer I experienced that weekend, the more my prayers fell into rhythm with theirs, the more I slowed my heart, the more I listened to what it seemed that God was saying, the more I felt as if God was just reminding me, I love you. And as I looked at the beautiful architecture around me, I looked at the rolling hills. As I touched the pew, as I sat down and I stood and I knelt in prayer. As I listened to the beautiful music, as these monks sang the words of God back to Him, as I smelled the incense burning continuously during these prayer times, as I ate the fresh bread and soup and fruit together with these other saints, every one of these moments seemed as if God Himself was reaching out to me with these physical expressions of love, letting me know that His delight was in me, His desire was for me. Sometimes during that weekend, I was so overcome, I just wept. I left profoundly changed. I'm not sure I could ever describe it, but I left realizing God loves me. I know all of us are at different places when it comes to love this morning. What I want you to hear, all of us were wired for attachment. In the context of a marriage relationship, these physical expressions of love include delight and desire and invitation and fulfillment, all of which are meant to intensify our attachment to our partner. But the most powerful attachment we form in life is with God Himself. May you hear His voice, brothers and sisters, today. May you hear His voice, the voice of your lover calling out to you. And may His physical expressions of love intensify your attachment to Him.